Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are back working on the doors of the Frankenhauler. Alright guys, welcome back, and if you've been following, you know this is a Frankenhauler. This is my 1954 Ford F600 truck cab that I have put on a 1995 Toyota Coaster bus chassis. If you missed the last episode where I was working on the doors, you can follow the link up above to catch up, and like always, like, subscribe, and comment. All of that stuff helps out the crazy algorithm. So, all right, now, first things first today, I do want to get into the Frankenhauler, but I've got a couple of things to do on the Ferrari that are niggling me. All right, so since I put the engine back in, the Ferrari has not been running very well. It's been running rough, and there's been some sort of underlying issue. Now, I got out my, my electric thermometer to try and test the headers to see if there's one that's colder than the other. Of course, the battery's flat, so I can't actually do that right at this moment. But I've just discovered something else that, let's see if I can actually demonstrate. I think the engine's possibly missing. Now, I'm trying to demonstrate how this is currently firing on that exhaust. And this exhaust is really rough. This exhaust is very smooth and firing a lot faster pulse than this exhaust. You can see that, bang, 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 bang. And I reckon we've got a missing cylinder on that bank. So, first things first is to pull all of the coil packs on that side and then start pulling out the spark plugs. That's quite a wet plug. So the first plug was very wet, and the next three were all covered in soot. All right, so at least I have narrowed down the problem. The fact that we've got lots of fuel in there tells me that basically, I mean, this is obviously not firing, whereas these are running really rich. Basically, I've got 3 cylinders that are black as pitch and one that is not firing. And I think what's happening is that with the closed loop, it is adding more fuel in. Somehow, it's compensating and making things pretty yucky. So I'm going to pull all the plugs, clean them all up, and double check all my wiring and everything. I mean, I don't believe anything has changed. All right, so to narrow things down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix things up. I'm going to put the spark plug from cylinder 1 onto cylinder 4, and I'm going to put the coil pack from cylinder 1 to cylinder 3. So everything's mixed up, and if there's still a miss, I can narrow down, was it a faulty plug? Very unlikely. Was it the faulty coil pack? Much more likely. Or does it stay on cylinder 1, in which case it's my wiring. So that way I can sort of narrow it all down and work out what the issue is. So while I'm at it, I pulled all the coils and plugs on the other bank and just cleaned all of the spark plugs because it was obviously running quite rich. Then it's going back, replacing everything, swapping over the coil pack and spark plug so I can see if I can work out where my miss is coming from. All right, now time to start it up and see if we can actually get it running on 8. Checking the exhaust, and it feels like it's still missing. So I don't know what's going on and why. So I think I need to delve a bit deeper. Aha! I have worked it out. So before it was cylinder number 8. That's actually, this front one is cylinder 8. And if I disconnect it, listen. So if I unplug it and plug it in, you can hear the engine labour, so obviously I am disconnecting that cylinder. Now I moved that coil pack to this cylinder here, so this is the coil pack is now on cylinder number 6. I disconnect and reconnect, makes no difference. So we have a dead coil pack. That's an easy fix. All right, I don't know why a coil pack has died, but that is a simple fix. I mean, it's relatively new. I don't know why it's died. There could be some other underlying issue. I'm not sure, but that is definitely the problem. So we can leave the AlphaRari now and get back onto Frank. All right, so back onto the Frankenhauler, and where we left off, I converted the door latches to Toyota door latches, more modern latches that will work and close the door and lock the door properly without it just flying open, as the original locks on these things had a habit of doing. They weren't very good. These have got the safety of the double latch, like pretty much all modern vehicles, so they're just a much safer version, and I'm happy with that. You may also remember I got them to work with the original internal handles, which is something I'm very happy with. But next thing I need to tackle is getting the external handles to work with these latches. All right, and this is the original external handle for the truck. So the design is, it's just got a button on the outside, you push it in and it pushes a rod on the inside. The only issue is that the Toyota locks need a downward push to activate the door latch rather than the horizontal push that this is doing. So what I need to do is I need to formulate some sort of bell crank so that when that rod pushes in, there is the other end of the rod that will push down and activate the Toyota door latches. So I'm going to do a little bit of thinking and see what we can come up with. So after a lot of head scratching, I started with a bit of a CAD template, got some cardboard out, drew up a bit of a basic idea of what I wanted to start with a bell crank, and then cut it out of a piece of sheet. All right, so this is my quick initial mock-up. So I've got my pivot point that's going to be about here. That pin, when you push, is going to push in this way, and you can see that little black cross. That is where I'm going to attach the arm, this arm of the lock, and this arm needs to push down, and that is what unlocks the door. So that is how my rough initial test piece is going to work. So with my initial template drawn up, I need to cut down the push rod that was originally on the Toyota latch so that it's a little bit closer to the size I need, and then it's time to start mocking things up and sort of test fitting and seeing where I need to go. I'm drilling in a bit of a hole in the side of the door to try and work out an initial pivot point and just test run and see if it works. And the first one didn't work. It was interfering with the door latch, so I had to remove it and trim it and put it back in, and all of this stuff is a lot of backwards and forwards, just testing and moving and tweaking to get everything to fit in the space available. All right, first round didn't work properly. The problem is that where my pivot point is, this lower section is heading downwards first, and the way it's mounted, it was hitting the top of this lock here. So basically what I need to do is I need to move it so that the pivot is more over the top of the pad, so that it goes mostly backwards or up rather than going down first. So yeah, a little bit of tweaking, and we'll try again with round 2. So time for round 2, and this time obviously I have more of an idea of what will work and what won't. So it gets easier and easier each time I go through this, and spoiler alert, it's more than 2, it's more than 3, it's probably more than 5 or 6. All right, that was a crazy amount of work. I went through, these are a couple of the iterations. I think I modified this bracket probably 10 times, trying to get the perfect angle to actually get that bell crank to push the trigger down without interfering with anything else. And I made Swiss cheese of the back of the door, moving the pivot point in all different directions. But now, if the handle was on, it actually, you press it and it will open. Obviously, I haven't bolted the handle on, but it does the job, and it opens with the original handle, which is exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to attempt to re-tap the original holes, which are obviously, they were imperial. Now I want to make them metric, see if there's enough meat in there. If not, then the game is over and I'll just get some new handles.
And then it was quite easy to re-tap the handles, and the M5 bolts now are quite secure.
All right. So I managed to tap the handle and now it accepts M5 bolts. So that was good. And now it opens from the factory handle on the outside and the factory handle on the inside. That is fantastic. So now it is all Toyota locks, but actually got the double safeties. Yes. So now I need to redo that pivot so that it actually will be permanent, because at the moment it's just single shear, so it's just bolted on one side and the whole thing can sort of just pivot on that. I need to lock it in from the other side as well so that it's not going to go anywhere.
So after some head scratching, I worked out that one side of my pivot is going to be through that same hole that the bolt was going through previously, and then the inside is going to be mounted to a 90-degree bracket. And this bracket I'm making out of 3mm plate just because it's easier to recess the nuts on the back, and that way I can actually still put a flat door trim on later. I weld on some captive nuts and then I have to start making my spacers. But I needed spacers where I could bolt them up tight, but it would not actually clamp my pivoting latch. And in this case, what I've done is I've turned down a shoulder that the latch can sit over, but it's slightly deeper than the width of the latch, so that when you bolt it up tight, the latch is still free to move and the spacer is nice and secure. And of course, while I'm doing it, I am doing two at the same time because I have two doors.
All right, so another whole heap of work later, and I've made up my bracketing system to hold my little pivot piece. I made this angle bracket which will bolt on to the inside of the door underneath the door card, and then the bolt where I had coming through before, that's in the same location from inside the door, but I had to make a spacer up that would sit inside. Basically what I did is I made the spacer up, and then I made a stepped end on the spacer so that you can do this up tight but still have a pivot. So that's what the stepped end is for, that goes through the piece, and this is all done up tight. So now this will be a very strong reinforced bracket to hold my pivot to actuate the door handle. And the reason why I made it out of this 2.5mm, 3mm plate is because I want to put it underneath the door trim. I wanted to have a fixing that was recessed that wouldn't stand out, so it'd be underneath the door trim and it's not going to protrude into the door trim at all. So that way I could actually drill a recess into the plate, and when I clamp this down, it'll actually bend in the sheet metal of the door into the backing plate, and the whole thing should sit nice and solid. So if that doesn't make any sense, let's bolt it in, and hopefully it's a little bit clearer when you see it in action.
So with some measuring to work out the offset of the back part of my hinge, I can mark in where I need to put my mounting screws, and then I can start drilling out the holes and then bolting it all together. It's a little bit cumbersome because there are a bunch of different pieces, but it's still functional and perfectly serviceable, so I'm quite happy to live with it. Of course, I'm going to be replacing those normal nuts on the inside of the door jamb with Phillips head screws later.
All right, and we have the door handle, the whole lot working as it's supposed to in its final form, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. That's taken over a day of work to do that one side, to come up with the whole concept and actually get it to function. Should be a bit quicker to do the other side. We're just going to repeat what we've done here. So let's copy these and do another lot.
So round 2 is much easier than round 1 because I already know what works. So I've just used my previous parts as templates and just remade them in a mirror image for the other side, and it's just a matter of going through and doing the whole thing again. I also know where to drill my pivot and where to mount everything, and because I've made things very symmetrical, it all works very easily.
All right, well, that is now all working properly. That was so much work to get just basically to rejig the door handles so that they would actually use the old locks, and of course the internal one works as well. So this is all doing what it needs to do on both sides. There's one last thing that I need to connect up on that side to get this all finalized. And that last thing that we need to do on this side is we need to add a lock. Now, I have the original door handle from the coaster bus. It only had the driver's door. There was no other sort of normal door. They just had the bus doors on the passenger side. So what I've got to do is I've got to remove this because obviously I do not want this ugly plastic handle in this old truck. I really hate those modified trucks and things you see, these old vehicles where they use these sort of handles. It just looks horrible. So I'm glad we've got the handle working. So we just need to transfer this lock into here somewhere, somehow mount it and get it to function as it should, because this lock still fits the same key as the ignition, which saves me a lot of messing around, and it's not nice having two keys, one door key and one ignition key. Even though this will have central locking, it's still going to be nice to actually have a door lock and one key.
So I start by removing the lock from the old door handle and then open out the old truck's existing door lock hole. And then it's time to start working out a mounting bracket. So again, using some heavier steel plate, I cut out a hole that's the right size for the lock to come through, and then drill a couple of holes where I can weld on some captive nuts. And I've now got a world-class tungsten grinder, which comes in handy because I dip my tungsten all the time. Now it's time to mount it onto the door, and just working out roughly the location takes a little bit of measuring and a little bit of time, but I get it in a nice position and then I can start test fitting. Now, connecting the external lock with the internal latch system was very difficult to film, but here I am just struggling to make a linkage that works.
Alright, so now I've mounted the lock. I found that this position is not going to work with the mechanisms of the latch. So it's too close to the arm it needs to connect to inside. So I need to move the lock down a bit lower so that it can actually have enough room to have a rod to have the articulation necessary.
Now, moving the lock down is not going to be a bad thing because it's going to make patching the external hole a lot easier anyway, as I can drill one hole that's the right size rather than trying to patch in half of a hole, which is always very difficult. And this was relatively easy. I just measured down 50 millimeters, moved the lock down and then remounted it, and then it all worked.
And if you can see there, the custom latch I made, so you see that linkage that I made there to connect up the lock, and that does what it needs to do. That's the door handle mechanism doing the door handle mechanism things. And we have a door that opens and then it locks. Nothing, unlock. Hey! So we have a win. This is a huge step forward as far as safety goes, and just getting the truck to a level that I would want to be driving around in and let Mrs. Jeff drive around in and things like that. So I am very happy with that. We have locks, we have door handles that work. Now, the next issue that I have caused myself a little bit of grief is by adding these locks, the inner rail of the window frame now needs to sit about 15 mil further in. So instead of the window traveling up here, it's just got to move over 12 to 15 millimeters. So it does mean that I have caused a potential issue. Now, getting glass to fit is not a big problem. Because these are flat panes of glass, it's all doable. There is also another option, which I had dismissed, but now I can reconsider, is a lot of people, normally this has the partition here and it has the vent windows in the front corner. I do like those vent windows. I think they're really good, but I'm going to add ventilation into the cab that I can work with later. So I can delete the vent windows and make a big single solid window. That is one of the possibilities, and then make it track slightly at an angle just so that it misses the lock and gives me a little bit more space. That is a possibility. Or I can, which is what I'm leaning towards at this stage, is basically, yeah, just space this out 15 millimeters, space everything out 15 millimeters, and then potentially I can just trim out this panel and just stretch it that 15 millimeters, put a filler in it, and you won't even notice it. It will just basically give me the locks and the safety, and still run essentially the same types of windows. Any other suggestions, let me know down below. So this has actually taken me so much time. It's just on these door handles, like 2.5 days of work just to get the door handles to work and the lock to go in. I'm only having a lock on the driver's side, by the way, as well. It's unnecessary to have one on either side. Just one door lock is fine. It'll also have central locking. But before we go, I want to leave this for this week, and I want to quickly just jump back over onto the Ferrari. Raceworks have sent through a new coil pack, so let's swap this in and just double check to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to.
Knowing the faulty coil pack made it very easy to just pull out the old one and mount in the new one.
That's better! Much better! The exhaust sounds even now. That is what it's supposed to do. All right, well, that has been another week where I don't really feel like I accomplished that much. I am very happy with the doors now on the Frankenhauler. At least we have locks that work. And just diagnosing and fixing an issue with the Ferrari is good. As I said, I drove it to Cars and Coffee last weekend, and it was horrible on the road. It was missing and coughing and spluttering, and just like basically because there was a fuel cut coming in to try and help me that I didn't know about, and that was good that it was just that simple fix. So Ferrari's back on the road. Frank is done for this week, and that's all the time I have. So I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in 1928, Henry Ford wanted to elude the British monopoly over the supply of rubber, so he set out to source his own. So in order to do so, he negotiated a concession of around 10,000 square kilometers of tropical rainforest in north-central Brazil. The plan was to build a prefabricated town to house around 10,000 people. These would be mainly the Brazilian workers and mostly American managers. It was known as Fordlandia, and it was immediately a logistical nightmare as there was no access by road. The only way in was by ship on the river. Henry Ford had very strong ideas on what Fordlandia would be like, building American-style houses, a hospital, a school, and even a golf course. The local Brazilians were forced to eat an American-style diet of unfamiliar food for them, which was whole wheat bread, oatmeal, canned peaches, and brown rice. Strict rules were also enforced, banning alcohol, tobacco, prostitution, and the homes of workers were regularly searched. However, a small settlement was established 8 kilometres upstream called the Island of Innocents, where there were bars, nightclubs and brothels. Now, the Americans did not have sufficient knowledge of tropical horticulture, and most of the trees that were planted died of disease and insect infestation. In 1930, the Brazilians revolted over Henry Ford's imposed diet and working conditions, and by 1934, Fordlandia was basically shut down without even a single drop of rubber ever being produced that was used in one of Ford's cars.
All right, so we have door handles that work, we have door locks that work. I still need to come up with some way to seal that door lock, sort of make a trim piece or something like that. That's sort of got to be done. And obviously now I've created another issue for myself by making the window track not fit, so having to narrow the window and the window track and all that sort of stuff. It's all part of this trickle-down effect that happens. You change one thing and it affects so many others. That's what I found on the Ferrari, and yeah, I keep digging myself deeper holes with this, but that's how it goes.
But it's a source of joy and, I guess, what's the word, seeking to find the solution.
That's it.
You enjoy it.
Yeah, I like a challenge, and
yes.
That's why I keep doing this.
It would be nicer sometimes if it was more straightforward.
Yeah, but it will all come together and be good. Just I have to choose the hard way.
Yeah, well, why do it once if you can do it twice? If it's worth doing twice.
Somebody said that. It must be someone very smart.
Someone wise.
Or not wise, just glutton for punishment.
Glutton for punishment. Thank you, everybody. Glutton.
Right.
If you want to help the glutton for punishment, subscribe, comments, and Patreon, of course. Help them out, see the videos a day early, no ads. And yeah, let's let this glutton carry on punishing.
See you guys.
Hi, guys. The plan was to build in fact, the only access was either by land, it was known as Fordlandia, and it was immediately a logistical nightmare because there were no roads, so access was only by the rivers or by air. No air.
It's 1928. There's not a lot of air travel.
Thank you. No! Called the Island of Innocents, where there were bars, brothels, and tobacconists.
Nightclubs.
Nightclubs.